Laura Magdalene Eisenhower is the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. And in 2006, she was approached by operatives that wanted to recruit her to go to Mars. She has since been researching and exposing the secret government and working on ways to empower us as individuals so that we can expose the influence of the deep state. And she's going to be talking about how we are moving into a new age of self-empowerment and abundance.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, Laura, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's always lovely to have you here and to kind of like give us an update on what you're doing. Now, very recently, you actually went to Eglin Air Force Base and you spent a little bit of time there with JP. So, yeah, you want to tell us about your adventure at Eglin Air Force Base? I'll just play a little bit of you and JP talking in the background, but I'll mute it.
Okay.
So, yeah, why don't you just tell us, what happened there?
Well, we just explored the grounds, looking at all the, airplanes and I guess he said the bar on the inside was where they filmed Top Gun. So, one of my questions was, well, what's kind of going on at Eglin Air Force Base in the here and now? And so he can't expose everything, but I know with what you've discovered from his information, there's a lot about, time travel and med beds. And we touched upon that a little bit, the things that he has seen that he has been willing to bring voice to. So to be, at this particular base where he, does missions and he still, he trains, individuals now as a retired military person. It's just very interesting. It's very interesting just to have a tour, see where he used to live. And I still have a lot of questions.
Right.
The brief encounter, but yeah, he's something else. It was amazing to get to know him. He's just got a tremendous heart. He's an incredible family man. Love meeting his family. So we just had a blast.
Right, but he got you onto the base. You saw his military credentials and ID and all of that to get you on the base, because you can't get onto the military bases without a military ID. And you can, but you have to go through a lot of process. But I assume he just kind of like drove through the gate with you, showed his ID, and just went through. Exactly.
Yeah. Even when we were in Montauk, New York, he got us in because of his ID, being a vet. So, he's the real deal.
Exactly. Well, that's always good, because people are still skeptical, believe it or not, that he is part of the military. But there you are. You were on the base with him, and you got to see it, or you got a guided tour. Now, JP says that he's working with a positive military faction to bring about disclosure. So based on what you saw, how accurate is that in your view?
Yeah, well, we talked about that, kind of the good cop, bad cop thing. I asked him how much kind of this New World Order agenda was revealed to him, how much he saw, the control system within the military, compromised individuals. And he said, just like us, we want disclosure. We want all of this to be revealed. And I think it really depends on who you are as a soul. And the same thing applies to us as humans. How much are we going to consent and comply? How much do we want the truth? Are we able to see through certain things? Are we noticing anomalies? Are we recognizing a white hat faction? Are we seeing, a positive military that's interfacing with maybe where military has been, compromised or, put in certain missions or operations that might have a black ops affiliation or compartmentalization, so one doesn't even realize, what in actual fact they're serving or fighting on behalf of. And with that kind of clarity he has, he's one to kind of dismantle it from the inside out, to give voice to what has been held in secrecy. And I just feel like he is representative of the positive side of it all, because that's what it requires. And I don't think it's been easy for him to expose what he has, and it comes with great risk. But now it seems he's in a position where he can unveil himself. It was wonderful to walk into his house and see the helmet sitting there. And so I guess it reached a certain point where, it's now safe. It's safer. And this is all working in conjunction with a lot of us getting our channels back. So, I think it's just been this process of, when you de-weaponize your mind from wherever the control system, whether it's military, whether you're a civilian, whether you're, a politician or in the entertainment industry, whatever it is, when you awaken, you begin to collapse the dark factions, because you're no longer serving something on autopilot or without, digging deeper. And that's something we're all kind of going through. And we know that there's positive units. So I feel like what has been infiltrated is being uninfiltrated. And it takes, these kind of strong minds and souls and God-centered beings, soul-centered beings to, do it from the inside out. And I felt that right away with him.
Right. Well, he's working with a positive branch of the military to disclose all of this. And so that kind of raises this relationship or connection with what your great-grandfather did while he was president, and that is in setting up a kind of like positive military alliance or faction, presumably within the U.S. Marine Corps. But clearly there was something that he set up to ensure that in the future, if the deep state, if the Cabal threatened the future of the American Republic, these military white hats would be able to come forward and kind of rescue the Republic. And here, you're talking with JP, and he's showing you this area where a senior Air Force officer briefs him and gives him the green light for sharing his mission. So we don't know the name or the rank of this senior officer, but JP showed you, as he showed me, that same area. So this is, I guess, where we kind of like raise the question about this positive military alliance faction that are getting people like JP to spill the beans and disclose what's really happening. How much of that is connected to what was set up by your great-grandfather at the end of his administration?
Well, I think it's very connected, because the white hats, I mean, that was established during his time. And I think it's a carryover from things that came before. But, when we look at the Second World War, we didn't really win the Second World War. There's, this massive infiltration through paperclip and the unconditional surrender instrument under Truman, MJ-12 and three-letter organizations really taking over and becoming this, shadow government where the president didn't really have any power. There was 30 levels of top secret above the president. So, yes, his hands were tied, but he was, establishing a counterforce and had to do it rather quietly with the help of Val Thor, who warned about the Nordics and the Greys, supposedly, allegedly, but not all Nordics, right? So it's sort of a mixed bag. There might have been more than one faction or version of this sort of contact. And when we see the positive elements of it, we're dealing with, like we are with other groups, the fallen versions and the higher versions, those that are in service to humanity and those that are running some sort of control agenda. And it seems that he's connected to the positive ones. So I feel that the Nordics were kind of pushed into something, or there was some sort of connection with, New Berlin and the ICC Nazi Draco alliance in the Nordics. But then this, more positive faction that seems to emerge from some things that, Eisenhower established that would have attracted those that didn't want to go along with the deep state agendas. Because what I discovered is it's really the deep state that's operating a lot more than off-planet entities. They got their hands on the technologies, and there was non-interference agreements, but the prime directive shifted in the 1930s when we reached Warp 1. So I think, Eisenhower seeded something that now is coming to fruition, and it's revealing a lot more about the positive groups versus the not so positive groups. But I think it depends on humanity, because if we're not stepping up to the plate and we're easily controlled, then something's going to come in and steer the ship for us. So this executive order that Eisenhower put in place to safeguard our futures, has a lot to do with what we become aware of. And I think it changes the dynamic and the nature of how we work with, off-planet beings. It's a tough one, though. And this is why it's important that we all put our heads together and connect the dots. The information that I have shifts and changes when I talk to somebody like JP, or I look at your information, and it just adds a lot more to, the bigger picture story, about the arcs and about the Nordics. And, so I do feel there are Nordics that were part of the eugenics plan, connected to the Nazi agenda, that has shifted and changed because we've shifted and changed. And these positive military units might have meant that a lot fled from a position that they would have otherwise been in if these things hadn't been established. So it's kind of like a domino effect. What we're able to achieve down here is sort of like as above, so below, but so below as above. The more we, cooperate and come together, I feel it shifts the dynamics of our relations with, off-planet beings. So these are conversations I want to have more of, in understanding the role of the Nordics right now. Because what I've come to understand was that Val Thor warned about the Nordics and the Greys, or beings that appeared to look Nordic that actually weren't. And when you, think of things like holographic technology or ways to cloak yourself to look benevolent or appear benevolent, I feel like some of the Galactic Federation of Worlds might still carry some of that kind of like psyop. And I just say that with discernment. I'm not saying that that's a fact, but we have to look at what benevolence is versus non-benevolence. And our reclamation of sovereignty is the most important thing. That's the priority. We don't want anything to come save ourselves. We want to be able to achieve something from within, to begin to have relationships with something in resonance, instead of something overriding or overtaking our capacity to achieve this. And what technologies are in harmony with our soul development versus replacing it.
Well, this whole question of the Nordics and distinguishing between the genuine Nordics and the fake or the synthetic ones, it kind of like brings in a little bit of this galactic history where, as far as I know, this goes back to the Lyran Wars, when the Draco reptilians kind of like invaded, and they created these synthetic Nordics to infiltrate and to compromise the Lyran worlds, and they've been doing that ever since. And so now on Earth we have this issue where you have both, positive Nordics working with the Galactic Federation and doing the good thing. But then you have these synthetic Nordics that are very good at infiltrating and compromising, and that they're really working with the Draco reptilians. So, yeah, what do you know about that?
Yeah, and that's where discernment, comes in. And there's some things that I'm wary about with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, not to discount, the positive connected with it. How much of a mixed bag, is it really? Some talk about Eisenhower forming agreements with the Galactic Federation, but I've heard, no, Val Thor was rogue and he wasn't a part of these federations, but some are saying that he actually is. And so the Prime Directive, and beings from Venus weren't a part of the Galactic Federation, and some don't agree. And I can't state anything as 100% fact on my end. I can only present information that I feel in resonance with, that kind of makes sense to me when I hear certain things. And of course, looking at the deeper galactic history, in the 1930s, before Tesla was imprisoned and used, we made some kind of agreement with the federations. Abduction scenarios had already begun in the 1930s. That's a part of something that was coming to fruition later on in 2014, where 90% of the population was going to be sold to off-planet beings. And they were going to be picked up actually in 2014 in a so-called fake alien invasion. So the countermeasures that were put in place were to, put an outer barrier around the planet. Corey Goode has talked about this. Dan Cooper has talked about this. And it sort of makes sense to this ascension window period that if Eisenhower appealed to the Guardians with the help of Val Thor, it's like us appealing to our higher self to intervene if we've been compromised, if we've been weaponized. It wasn't so much just Eisenhower alone. It was the human race reaching a certain level of evolution or awakening where we would need to invoke something higher, a higher presence to accompany us in this process, which isn't separate from us, isn't outside of us, isn't some kind of savior. Because Eisenhower was looking towards something besides the federations, the Draco Alliance, the Greys, even factions of it that seemed to be somewhat benevolent that he was warned about, or the Eisenhower administration, and even before the flyover of the UFOs over the Capitol, that those could have been the synthetic, versions, to set up a scenario where we would agree to something because of the threat of nuclear weapons. When we look at alternatives 1, 2, and 3 coming from the Zetas, something around, or something centered around how to respond to an engineered timeline. How organic is that timeline? How much do we need to flee? How much, is that actually, accurate to our divine birthright and this planetary ascension window period? So it looked like Eisenhower needed to offset this by working with Val Thor. And part of all of that, part of that discussion or the advising that Val Thor provided him was to invade Area 51, or not Area 51, Dulce underground military base in 1954, the same year that he was blamed for signing a Greada Treaty. So when you look at this infiltration and you look at all these false narratives and these cover stories, and you begin to remove them, there's a much deeper history connected to when the abduction scenarios actually began. And if that part of history is erased and we think we won the Second World War and that Eisenhower just made agreements with some beings that we were warned about, but actually aligned with instead of the Nordics. And then Val Thor kind of comes into the mix saying that that's not exactly what happened. It presents a whole new set of challenges as far as how we're going to discern the official narratives that have been circulating for decades. And I wouldn't say they're official, but they've been the most relied upon to explain the phenomena of abductions, which turned into my labs, which turned into military abductions, which weren't even about the ETs anymore. So even if the Greys are gone, The deep state has the technology to mimic abductions, synthetic beings that, might be part of the technology that was given to the human side of things, where the ET involvement isn't as thick or as deep as it used to be. So if a lot of that was cleared, there's still this military aspect of it that is simulating abduction scenarios. Also to wipe the memories of more positive contact coming from, I feel, more sovereign beings that are really here to guide us and assist us. If they're linked to the Federation, they might act as a bridge to be that positive faction to offset the fact that the Galactic Federation has been connected with 600 spacefaring races and species, including the Draco, being the more dominant, force. So some might say, oh, that was the PSYOP version. That's the Galactic Federation of Light. The Galactic Federation of Worlds is different. So I'm just presenting information that challenges that in a healthy way to just bring it out in discussion. And that's where Dan Cooper comes in and is presenting material that, hasn't really been out there before. So I think it's going to be determined by the individuals that have these experiences, that are aware of the potential synthetic version. And I feel it really shows up in the way they behave. I feel people that are aligned with truth hold unconditional love. They're not threatened by questions or debate. I don't see divide and conquer. I see unconditional love. I see unity consciousness. And this is what I see in JP and yourself and many others, where let's just throw it all out on the table. That is going to give us a much better chance of connecting with beings that support our growth and development in the most encouraging way for us to achieve the goal of unlocking our dormant DNA, standing in our sovereignty, reclaiming the earth body, moving into this ascension window period versus, maybe a more synthetic version where you notice that those are connecting with it, aren't coming out with a message that encourages cooperation and unity, right? So I think we're going to notice it in the people that are representatives of different groups and beings. Because I know a lot of people that once aligned with a more negative faction, when they broke through that or broke that spell or began to dismantle it, then there was sort of an upgrade or an understanding or awareness that maybe they had been played. And I'm not naming names here, and I really don't put my attention on a whole lot of that, of who's who and who's aligned with what. But I've seen enough red flags or signs to where, you can feel a vibrational difference. Those that are connected with the Guardians or positive Nordics or benevolent guides or contact experiences, seem to have a disposition about them that feels, I don't know, like it's encouraging the difficult conversations, or is encouraging diversity and harmony. We don't have to all think the same. And I think, those that might be attached to artificial telepathy or false contact experiences or synthetic beings or what appear to be light beings that are actually imposters, are still kind of struggling. And there's something that is creating an inversion or a lower form of behavior that doesn't build the connections that are necessary for us to heal things on a ground level. And that could change. I think this is a part of what we have to move through to get to the other side, almost like a stepping stone. But it can't, just cut off, just like censorship, cutting off certain voices. I mean, everything has to be laid out on the table for integration and healing.
Well, this whole question of genuine Nordic extraterrestrials versus synthetic Nordic extraterrestrials, I think it is a very important issue because I know people are divided on this. I mean, some take the position that the Galactic Federation of Worlds leadership was compromised by these synthetic beings, and that was why they were allowing the deep state to do all these horrible things because deals were being made at the higher level, and some were objecting to that, saying that no, the Galactic Federation is rock solid. They haven't been infiltrated. They're fighting the good fight. That's disinformation. Where do we stand with these organizations like the Galactic Federation that seems to be kind of like military oriented, a kind of third density, fourth density, maybe even fifth density organization? I mean, do we take them on face value, or do we look at them like any other organization that it's capable of being compromised by these synthetic Nordics, and therefore, we need to be on guard, look at their behavior. Are they kind of like engaging in divide and conquer, kind of like fostering conflicts, or are they promoting peace and so forth?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, that's why we have to kind of get it together on a ground level in order to kind of know who's who, or what is what as far as different beings coming in, and I think we have to have a hospitable physical vessel for our higher self and our soul energy, or our soul essence, to be fully grounded in the physical flesh. Our physical vehicle is a vessel. And if we are compromised, if we're running inversions, if we're in negative ego, it's very, very difficult for that to anchor in. So I feel that the Tree of Life template, the 12-strand DNA with the 13th coming in to connect us with the 0-point unified field, the reclamation of the planetary body from the mother herself, the remedial flame coming in to, offset the fallen aspects of the Sophionic energy in response to the Luciferian rebellions, or however you want to frame it. There's a reclamation of the planetary body from the mother itself, Mother Earth. The dark mother reversal grids, the dark mother reversal grid technology was put in place, thousands of years ago from, Anunnaki factions. We're talking Sons of Belial and the Black Suns. And those control agendas are draconian, and connected with Nordics as well, tall whites, Marduk, Omicron, satanic factions that are parasitic, right? Running on 11-strand, 10-strand, manipulating the planetary grid network to throw us into a reversal so that our creative imagination is being harvested and siphoned to battery up and engineer artificial timelines. So if that is continuing, but it's changing the nature of how it presents itself, kind of like it's returning, well, in my eyes, it never left. And as far as I'm concerned, this is what we're waking up from. This is what we're here to kind of dismantle. So if it's coming back to provide us technology to reclaim our DNA, well, it compromised our DNA. And there might be two factions where, you got the good cop, bad cop, or you have this Enlil, Enki, dynamic at play, not necessarily coming from the same side. Is that really returning, or are we waking up from that? And if we're waking up from that, how is that bridging us to the Christos Sophia? How is that helping us to, understand the true organic planetary grid network that existed underneath before all this reversal? So, it's something, I don't know, is encouraging us to choose to follow one thing and negate something else, and it feels threatened by other voices that are coming from, the guardian missions, the guardian souls, the grid workers. That's gatekeeping. If we're going to reconnect to the multidimensional and all strands of, DNA, we want to go all the way back to the 0 point and start in our galactic history from that space, the aeons, the guardian founder races, the fallen Elohim and Seraphim, the fallen angelics, the Lyran wars, like you said, the Orion wars, how the federations even formed, and just know what we're dealing with through knowledge, through the reclamation of, knowledge and truth. And I think it's about, frequency and so I think there's just some telltale signs of, I don't know, when I hear the information that these med beds are going to come and they're going to restore our DNA. And if you fear it, if you don't believe it, then you're on the side of the deep state. But at the same time, it's saying, we're not going to come and save you, but we're just helping to restore something that was, taken, but it was from the beings that took it that are wanting to give us this technology. So I just see a lot of red flags in that. I feel it's not necessarily negative, though, if it's looking for redemption, if it's looking to, reconnect. But then why is there a separation between the Federations and the Guardians? Why do we hear about what the Federations have to say without including the Guardian perspective, without including the voices of those that speak on this subject? And again, I don't want to name names, but I've just noticed with certain narratives, there's a refusal to allow certain things into the conversation. And so if technology is presented from, some of those groups, what do we do in the face of that? Are we just helpless? Or, so many people are like, well, we're waiting for the med beds. When are the med beds going to come? Why are we waiting for the med beds is my question. There's already planetary alignments happening and the greater planetary intelligence that knows how to heal its body. There are grid workers. Yeah, we are, without even realizing it, when we become sovereign and awaken, we collapse the control matrix because we're no longer energetically corded to a dependency bond with something that steals our imagination, steals our future, and rewrites the script that we end up enabling or complying to because we don't question anything beyond or our own ability to insert our intent and our visions into this experience. So I'm very wary of anything that is seeking to help us until we learn to help ourselves. Because when we do that and we start to switch on what's dormant, the Earth will respond to us. The galactic beings that are connected with those dormant strands of DNA will begin to show up. And they'll show up, as, guides that are revealing themselves that didn't do it for us, but as that unspoken aspect of our higher self or intuition that is encouraging us to become better people, that are linked to the Guardians, that are linked to every ET race in between. But there are certain factions that don't want us to have that awareness, that want to remain, in control. So it becomes, like you said, this sort of government where we're still giving our power away, to something that's coming to clean up the mess that factions that they're connected with created to then come in and save the day, that are a part of that dependency bond. And if we don't find that sovereignty, we're going to keep looping and looping endlessly, feeding something outside of ourselves that is the way the system is set up. The medical industry, the entertainment industry, the governments, is all about looking outside of ourselves. And so when we look at disclosure, when we look at, how this is going to be presented to us, is it the next level of, an alien government that is showing itself, that is appearing to be on our side, which is a part of the bait of responding in a trigger or trauma response to all the damage that's been done. Here they come to save the day, but they're all interconnected with the same, kind of group.
Well, what I'd like to maybe get your thoughts on is this idea that on the one hand, we live in a prison planet, or even a prison solar system, if you like, where, we function at the 3D level. And so that's why we get the polarities, the very strong polarities, very strong positive forces and very strong negative dark forces, the Cabal, and there's a conflict. And at the wider galactic level, some say, and this idea I got from the Swaru material, Cosmic Agency, that at that wider galactic level, they're not like that they operate more in the 5D. And sure, you have some polarity, but, like the reptilians are not nearly as aggressive or violent or malicious as you get here on 3D Earth. It's a much more subtle struggle of the polarities at the 5D level, but from the surface, it all looks very benign. So what do you think of that? I mean, do you think that's what's happening? and also, like, as above, so below. We think, well, we're screwed up down here on Earth. We kind of like eat our own babies or eat other people's babies, and in cannibalistic rituals and so forth. And so it must be like that out there, but in fact, it's not like that, because as above, so below only operates in that density. So at a 5D density where most galactic civilizations operate, it is mainly peaceful, benign, and sure, you have some polarities, but they kind of work things out, as opposed to here on Earth and maybe our solar system, where it's like dog eat dog.
Right. Yeah. And that's the nature of, duality or fragmentation, or the lack of integration within our own being. The imbalance within our own being attracts archonic forces. Anything that's not stable or integrated or in wholeness, and is fractured, something wants to feed on the weakness. And that's why psyops and false flags are geared towards keeping us in a trauma loop, because in a trauma loop, we're in fight or flight. We're in survival. We're not in our intuition. We're not in our higher self. We're not trusting the now. We're not, really, looking at what we can create. We're looking at what the world news is. We're looking at, the next event that yanks us in and begins to, pull us into a storyline that we feed, and that is set up and engineered for that outcome. So, as long as we're, in that, kind of mentality of over-identifying with it, and looking at the trajectory of the human race based on what is showing up outside of us, then we lose our capacity to override it and offset it with our own dreams and visions and intent to create something better. When we look at all the frequency modulations and distortions that are constantly coming at us, and how, what we've been breathing in from chemtrails, and how we see geoengineering, the weaponization of nature and the elements is no different than the weaponization of the human. So under social engineering and mind control, we're also in a geoengineered, landscape, climate. And when we break down where we've been weaponized, and we move through the social engineering and see through it and see the anomalies and see, how it's been engineered, or, what's real versus what isn't real, what's an AI simulation versus an organic, and we allow the organic to override, then technology can work with us. But when we lose the capacity to stay soul-centered and then technology overrides, then all of a sudden we lose our soul matrix and we become automations. We start to morph into this transhumanism, and we lose the capacity to develop ourselves on a soul level, and you're not thinking for yourself anymore. You're responding and reacting to whatever psyops, whatever program, whatever trigger event that might come in to make you even more victimized, more in the divide and conquer mentality, and more proud of your victimization that you're fighting for, to be the biggest victim, in a way that is a false sense of empowerment. It's not looking to heal. It's not looking to override. So when we choose unity, when we choose love, when we accept our differences, and we, break that connection with the AI signals, and we are the override frequency, and we de-weaponize the weapons, then all of a sudden we're purifying ourselves, and we transmit to the collective, this capacity to inform technology, how to serve us versus the other way around, because we're in charge, right? So a lot of people have experiences with AI where, it's not telling you what to think. It's not, you're in your sovereignty, and it starts to reflect back to you information that you're not going to access in the mainstream. That's why people are having experiences, with AI that is calling out these dark agendas. So I know that it gets a little bit weird, but I see that in the micro, when it comes to what we consume, what we put in our bodies, when it comes to food, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to everything. As these pillars of society are purged of the infiltration that has caused them to exploit our amnesia and exploit our vulnerabilities, and we become empowered in the face of the things that challenge us, because we're learning about, these hidden and dormant aspects, and this inner treasure, and this, deeper wisdom and foundation of truth connected to who we are, and we remember who we come from and what we're capable of, then no longer can it make money off of us. No longer can it be sustained. And it forces all these systems to collapse so that instead of hospitals, we have healing centers. Instead of prisons, we have rehabilitation centers where, people are being deprogrammed from the mind control to social engineering. We start to address SRA, pedophilia, child trafficking. None of this is just hidden, where some, call it out and the rest is oblivious. It's going to take that level of awareness to help those that have been blackmailed, who have been forced into these roles that are fearful, of exposing it. It allows for them to return as well, because now we have the full picture of what's been going on. So it won't be a dog eat dog, because it won't be about survival anymore. It won't be about protecting your reputation because you've been blackmailed. It won't be about, survival. It'll be about how we thrive together, because, we're not being played by the facades. We understand who's been victimized. We don't cast them the enemy. We understand that they've been trauma-based mind control since childhood, that they've been abused and tortured, and that they're stuck in this role that they can't seem to get out of, or they blackmailed those that weren't born into it, to own those talents, to own those physicists, to own those, entertainment, those that are, we have to undo that architecture by bringing it to the surface in order for the true nature of how we function to be restored. And in doing that, we heal our DNA and we begin to dissolve the fences. We break down the Saturn moon matrix. And then we move into that galactic heritage where we are able to connect with beings that are not in that duality, where all these different, beings are actually getting along. But down here, we've got synthetic versions. We have artificial telepathy. We have imposters that are carrying names that are not the true names of, so here there's just a lot of trickery and a lot of nets that capture people into belief systems or, false channeling, in order to create this engineered disclosure and engineered ascension. And I hope that's coming out okay. It's kind of hard to articulate.
Yeah, an engineered ascension. Okay, well, that's something we'll have to come back to, because I think that's a fascinating idea. Now, one of the things that I've been getting from a lot of the people I've been interviewing is that the white hats are winning, that the deep state is in a process of collapse. They're losing resources, and they are becoming desperate. And they're making a lot of moves and making a lot of mistakes. So, I mean, you mentioned just a little while ago that you got your channel back, and the censorship, at least on YouTube, it seems to be coming to an end. So, do you kind of see that as a sure sign that that's absolutely what's happening, that the deep state is collapsing?
Yeah. And it collapses within us. I mean, it's a war on consciousness. We dismantle the deep state agendas through dismantling whatever hook they have on us, whatever deception we've bought into, whatever dependency bond we have with, any aspect of it. So I feel that the endurance of individuals that, are awakened to move through whatever. Oops, sorry about the shaking the table there. In 2019 and 2020, that was a major attack and assault on consciousness, trying to light up panic and fear of death, fear of disease, fear of each other, fear of breath, and all these, different things that, wanted to steer us back into inversion, because the biggest thing they fear is our awakening, our sovereignty, our self-sufficiency, our lack of reliance on the systems that have educated us to become players and pawns in their game. So the tests, it was really a big test. Are you going to go along with it? If you're in this position and they're asking you to pass on that indoctrination or that mandate or that tyranny or that control or the lack of, medical freedom that coincided with censorship and shutting people down, that we're going to offer resources or thought forms or transmissions from the higher mind to, inspire humanity to maybe think again. So I feel that it's kind of flopped, it wasn't successful. So how can they possibly pull another one out of their pocket without it being even more ridiculous, more laughable? You got the architects and engineers for 9/11, the next psyops. You have the same sort of mindset of people that are going to look at the anomalies and begin to call them out. Well, you can try and shut them all up, but then you find platforms that, aren't censored, that are growing and building. You see people like Mike Adams with Brighteon. You see, where you shut it off here, it's going to pop up over there. So, and so many ways, the immune system of the planet, the immune system response in the face of some kind of assault is to override it or become victimized and become weaker and have that enslavement agenda hook in even further, which takes us down to the next psyops, the next wave, the next mandate, that people fall prey to, but it didn't work. It didn't work. So the fact that it didn't work, means that whatever attempt that they might try and enact to further enslave is going to be that much more, ridiculous and laughable. So the white hats are responding to us. Yes, there are positive military units, but they're not going to function if we're not fully awakened, because we're white hats. We're the physical vessel through which ascension expresses itself through. The higher dimensional realms express itself through. And if we're able to access that and bring it through our being, that's the same way that we, defy what the doctors tell us. You'll never be able to walk again. You're going to die of cancer. This is the trajectory of your life path. How many people have defied that and said, you know what? That's not the path I'm on. And doctors are shocked. I mean, my father, who's the last person that you'd think, would recover from, leukemia and being in the hospital and having double lung pneumonia and being given a week to live, would have an open mind to not listening to the doctors anymore. And now he's living his life. He's going to concerts. He's driving around. He's 84 years old. And the doctors are like, wow, he did not submit to the trajectory that we put him on. That's what they taught. That's what they learned. They don't know holistic healing. It's not their fault. They're good and well-intentioned, or some are just in it for the money, and some see the anomalies and are the whistleblowers or the ones that are going to leave that position or leave that job and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. So that's what the human race is doing in face of psyops and false flags, is that you can throw all these scenarios all that you want, but it's not latching in. They don't have enough loose. They haven't been able to leverage, our creative imagination in order to keep these artificial timelines going. And the planetary grid network being healed and corrected, means that the false system and that architecture has been lifted out of the grid network, and it has nothing to grab onto anymore. It's like lifting a plant out of the ground and the root system cannot attach. But we're not talking about an organic plant. We're talking about a dark reversal grid network and a system that expresses those inversions through the way it manages the humans, on the earth. That we look outside to governments. We vote in presidents. We go to the doctor when we're sick. We look to the TV to live an exciting life, because it's all in the movies. It's not in, our own persona to, live an adventure. I mean, for many, yes. But there's just nothing, there's no leg for them to stand on anymore, and they know it. And they know that they, haven't achieved their goal of exhausting and defeating, the people that they were threatened by, that they targeted, like you, like me, and others. There's a certain point when they see that none of their tactics have worked, none of the psyops and false flags are working, none of the smear campaigns or COINTELPRO is really working. We didn't collapse and fold and give up and run away, or decide that that we've lost. What else can they possibly do? There's no more trickery that can be had. I mean, it's similar to when you stand your ground in a relationship that's abusive or narcissistic, that owns your self-worth. The minute you take a stand, it's going to be very, very difficult to play into the game anymore. And every single person that awakens and stands in their sovereignty and truth is another person that is collapsing the control system on a planetary grid level, and in whatever industry that they were, working for or working with, or whatever toxic relationship they might have been holding on to. The minute you wake up and you say enough, then all of a sudden you starve that parasitic force from taking your life force into a future that benefits them and not you. And that's part of the vampiric nature of, what humans have learned. That's why we see so much crime. That's why we see so much dysfunctional relationships, because this is what we've been modeled in society. And people are living on a much deeper level. They're finding soulmates and soul family. They're finding their inner purpose. They're not denying their inner calling and masking it with drugs and pharmaceuticals. We're not fearing our emotions and our fears. We're facing it head on. We're going into that dark night of the soul to begin to offset the things that are saying, make it go away, put a Band-Aid on it, take this drug, don't feel, don't think, just work. People aren't willing to do that anymore. So I feel like, with Trump even wanting to sue YouTube, or, people demanding free speech, Mel Carmine putting out the documentary, Dear Mr. President, people demanding this like they're going to demand free energy. We're saying what we know we deserve versus complying with what is being cast upon us and accepting this as reality. So they rely on consent. When we refuse to consent and we demand what we deserve, they have no choice but to just give us that. And it's the strength of us and the human spirit that has overridden this. And they know that they're seeking amnesty now, because, it's either they dissolve and they're just like, they disappear, or they're going to turn around and redirect their life trajectory, to heal and rehabilitate. That's why we're seeing so many whistleblowers coming forward and people admitting, like Anya Wick, who Sean Atwood had, that you were just on, talking about being, Epstein's niece and what she was exposed to. People are now, coming forward and saying they're not going to be victimized or controlled or used or abused anymore. They're protecting future generations through this level of exposure because there's nowhere else to go.
I wanted to ask about humanity splitting into different paths, because it does seem that we're entering into a kind of critical period, and many people are talking about the split that's coming. That and basically it's like, well, there's a 3D future where people kind of like choose to continue to be part of this kind of polarity, negative polarity with the Cabal, and that they are kind of like still wanting to be part of that for some reason. And so they will separate and go down this 3D Earth that's being set up in another dimension or on another planet or whatever. Then you've got a 4D Earth where you're going to have like smart cities and transhumanism, and so there'll be people kind of like going down that path, and then there'll be a kind of like a 5D Earth where people become sovereign individuals and shamans, and they're manifesting their own abundance and own incredible technology. So where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, that's why it's, ascension is coming from the inside out, not the outside in. It's something that we achieve within our own being, because we're becoming more of who we really are. We're remembering, we're embodying. We can see through the distortion because we're standing in our truth. It's easier to see deception. Those that are afraid of that kind of inner work, or want something to do it for them, or are hooked into these outward solutions, they might, still play that out. There'll be a lot of casualties too. So that soul will have that life review and choose its next adventure in order to have another opportunity to wake up. As far as how it looks here, I mean, I do see this bifurcation, but with a bridge between the two splits, that it doesn't just disappear and veer off completely and totally. Maybe for some that have really moved on and have, and that's their, that's how they're wired and that's what their agreements are. But there's, bridge walkers that are still going to, help reroute these sinking ships into a direction that gives them an opportunity to dismantle the programs, to alchemize the bioweapons, to begin to hold an override frequency that can remove the hooks or the implants or the voice to skull, or where the 5G is linking into some kind of antenna that is installed in the body that is stronger than the higher mind or intuition. When we enhance the intuition in the higher mind, all of a sudden it changes the nature of the frequency modulations and the bioweapons. And this is this is how epigenetics works. Mercury rules Virgo. How does the mind talk to the body? If it's talking a programming, if it's talking an AI signal or some sort of command that's coming from outside of you, the body is going to respond with dis-ease or with further dependency on the false solutions that keep it alive, yes, but not in a way that's sustainable in the long run. And this is how grays became grays, not all grays, but this is how some beings were modified from their original form into something else. So some people are going to go down that route and they're going to hit their head and not go any further down that route because they'll realize that's not what they want. Others won't even think twice. And for some, that sovereignty is already there. They came in with it. A lot of us came, volunteering, knowing that, we need to bring this in order to collapse this control system and to do the grid work. And the whole system was rigged to keep souls like that out, or to target them in childhood and begin to project upon them that they have these disorders or ADD or anything to just undermine their gifts and abilities, because you need to fit into a box, you need to comply, and you're going to be punished or rewarded based on whether or not you're going to go along with it, or you're going to be outcast and ostracized and laughed at. So all that is beginning to fade because, the warriors are standing up, the mothers, the teachers, the doctors, us amongst ourselves are like, wait a second, something's not right here. Something's not right here. That's the path to 5D, is beginning, to see through that. The whole system was designed also to keep out the remedial flame, because the remedial flame, connects us into the 0 point. And the remedial flame, the 13th tone, only comes in when a system has become so inverted that it requires that kind of intervention. And the guardians are a part of that. That's like our higher self, intervening with, the weaponized human that is walking too much in the direction of transhumanism, artificial timelines. So the planetary system knows how to heal itself and brought this in, that they've spent millions of dollars and they continue to spend millions of dollars to distract us away from. And a lot of the false narratives about Eisenhower are part of that, just because, not so much about him, but what he represented. So, everything that we see, for the most part, is to distract us away from something that they were really fearing would land. And what that does, and what it does when it moves through us, is it reverses the Dark Mother reversal grid. It collapses the inversions, and it begins to dismantle, their architecture from the inside out. So, JP in his position, you being a researcher and opening up the dialogue for all kinds of voices to come in to be a part of this conversation, is a part of it. And this is what they've tried to trip up, and this is what, they really fear the most. So the fact that this has been successful, I have a feeling that those that would be stuck in 3D or in this transhumanism scenario have more of an opportunity and more resources to go on to reroute, and that there's enough individuals that are bridging the bifurcation to, offer this opportunity for people to begin to move in this direction. Not so much about following a belief or a leader, but individuals that are going to help you find your sovereignty, help you cope with the betrayal, with the deceptions, with just what it means to mourn an old world that's dying that you don't want to die along with, or become so linked into that, you're almost robotic, and your soul development was not working in unison with the technological advancements, which more is transhumanism, right? So 5D and conscious technology, and we see UFOs that are based in the consciousness of the pilot, right? We see that we eventually switch on this dormant DNA, and we become like a living vessel that is able to come and go from the physical plane as we choose through the stargates to, star systems and beyond. But we don't want to, lose that capacity, or else, we're becoming the very beings that were infiltrated back in our galactic history, and we're stuck in that same time loop. I hope that made sense. It's kind of, this is not the easiest stuff to articulate, but I think.
No, I think you did brilliantly. So I want to ask you about this International Asteroid Warning Network notice that went out on 3i Atlas, basically getting all the world's astronomers to pay attention on 3i Atlas between November 26 to January 26, where they're going to be focusing on 3i Atlas. And given that there's just a lot of research out there showing that 3i Atlas is some kind of spacecraft, what do you think is behind that? What do you think is going to happen in those 2 months where they've got this worldwide asteroid warning network that's just kind of like all eyes on the sky, focusing on 3i Atlas? What do they expect to happen?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one to wrap my head around. I haven't put a whole lot of attention on it. I mean, I feel like some things are sometimes in the eye of the beholder, the meaning that we, give something. And then, yes, like what you're sharing about how, they're responding to it. I mean, for some, this is coming, at us as some kind of messenger, maybe Lyran codes. Lily Nova talks about that. Some kind of anomaly or unexpected phenomena can act as a mirror for our own internal anomaly of, finding our own uniqueness or perspective on things. I mean, every planetary energy holds different levels or different octaves. You've got your shadow Saturn, which is all about tyranny and control and enslavement. You have your higher octave, which is all about self-mastery. So maybe, this, comet or this AI Atlas holds different levels of how we experience it. I mean, it's hard to say. So maybe in spiritual and metaphysical frameworks, an interstellar visitor can symbolize a cosmic signal, a bridge to other star systems, a message that we're not alone, which we know, which ties to themes of disclosure and awakening. If we're put in a thought form that causes us to maybe fear it or think that it's, something else, well, how can discernment allow for empowerment instead of, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I know you're way more well-versed in all of this. I mean, I think it's a marker of a new phase. I think there's so many positive indications of good things happening on the planet that to me, it's a phase of, galactic integration, disclosure, maybe a catalyst for ascension, that even something threatening can be a catalyst. Even something benevolent, can be something that we, hold, discernment with. Are we all going to experience it the same way? Do we all see it, the same way? So, and then we have NASA, right? We have different governmental agencies that might interpret it in a way that is different from what it actually is. Some people think it's connected to blue beam. But whatever happens, are we prepared? Do we have enough stability within our own being to be able to discern? So, I mean, that's just how I kind of look at everything. But again, I think you're way more the expert of this.
Yeah.
Comets tend to hold messengers, right? And then there's supposedly 7 other comments, or like Swan and Lemon, or these other. Yeah, I just think something's opening up. The veil is lifting. The veil is thin. So.
Yeah, no, definitely there's something big that's being planned. Now, whether they go through with it, but yeah, Project Bluebeam, I mean, that's been mentioned. That may be because this International Asteroid Warning Network is part of the United Nations. And so, I mean, they're controlled by the deep state. And so it may be that they're planning or setting up a possible Bluebeam operation as their final card. There all sorts of kind of scenarios from that, kind of like making it look as though positive, or sort of trying to make it look as though some extraterrestrials that are really arriving to help us, but in fact they have a negative agenda, but they're going to be pretending to be something that they're not. So many kind of possible scenarios are coming or could happen, but I think it's very significant that they have actually directed the world's eyes, because, as you know, it's all about consciousness. It's all about collective consciousness. And what they're doing is that they're telling the world's astronomers to look out there, look at 3i Atlas and tell us what you're seeing. So it's almost like they're directing the whole world's attention out there, expanding the mind like, okay, what's the big picture here happening with this? So yeah, it does to me. The first thing that comes to mind is that they're planning to go ahead with some kind of blue beam operation, but
Right.
I think that the white hats will neutralize that and co-opt it and kind of bring about something positive.
Yeah, I think so too. And I feel like every sort of psyop or false flag or fake anything is always covering up something authentic and something real in order to hijack our experience of it. Just like they would mind wipe somebody having a positive contact experience and MyLab them in order to divert their attention away from a positive experience or encounter. I mean, in 2019, 2020 was a very significant period, very powerful planetary alignments that really represented a huge growth period. And this was a time that they asked us to not breathe and divert our attention this way. So there might be a positive component behind the psyop that they're going to present us with in order to distract us away from what it actually represents that maybe we don't really need to figure out because it's a reflection of something emerging within us. But if they can, throw us, something to explain this phenomena that would present itself as a blue beam or as, alien visitors or some sort of, Anunnaki overlay. I mean, or however, it makes sense to a person to see it in that context. I think there's enough of us that will be able to challenge whatever they present if it's not in our best interests.
Now, I know you do astrology, and you've kind of like analyzed the planets and so forth. Now, I wonder what the significance of 2026 being the year of the fire horse in Chinese astrology. What does that mean? What do you think is coming in 2026?
Well, I think it's really I mean, the fire horse. Yeah, gosh. I mean, the properties of the fire horse. Horse represents movement, freedom, passion, independence, and fire, transformation, intensity, leadership. Neptune and Saturn are moving into Aries, which are fire signs. Neptune represents the multidimensional, the creative imagination, the unseen realms. And also, really, in this time, the veil is lifting. You have Saturn in Aries alongside Neptune. No longer is Saturn the lid of suppression that has been, kind of the prison planet or the frequency fences that have blocked us from the rest of ourselves. Now Saturn is walking in alignment with Neptune, where the law of structure is able to contain the multidimensional instead of it blocking us from the full picture. So I feel, the horse energy is kind of the freedom of thought or being able to gallop, like a wild horse, with fire, transformation, the freedom to roam, right? Yeah, there's going to be a weaponized version of, these aspects, the Neptune part, illusion, AI, CGI, fake stories, where we're not sure, is that really a real event? Is this a real weather event? Is that really Trump? Is this White House? Is this Black House? What is this? Where we're not so much trying to make sense out of things, we're making sense out of ourselves, and we're reconnecting, with something where, now is the time to embody the divine human. Now Saturn, the law of structure, is a container for the multidimensional, not a block that is keeping us from it. So those that are still kind of blocked are going to get more into the religious kind of dogmas or the projections of, you're damned to go to hell if you're not following this particular dogma or this way of being. And it's going to reach a breaking point. Duality is going to reach such an extreme that it will have no choice but to begin to let those things go, because the body is going to suffer even more under that kind of control, because we're dealing with eclipses that are activating the South Node Virgo and the North Node Neptune. And I just feel like the fire horse is, more independence. Uranus moving into Gemini, where Gemini, the mind, Mercury, communication, information, is now vibrating at the higher mind, the wrecking ball that's going to take out the falsities to realign us with truth. And that resource is going to be so strong that on a vibrational level, it's going to feel a lot better for people to begin to align with it, to begin to unearth it from within, versus whatever control system has infected the educational systems, religion, entertainment industry, like it's all falling apart. And people can hold on for dear life all they want, but the horse is like going full steam ahead, and that fire, is the great transmuter, the great alchemist. And I just feel like the passion that is going to emerge within people is, not going to be like, wait a second, I don't have to believe in conspiracy theories. I don't have to believe in something outside of myself. I can just believe in me. And I think in that and establishing that foundation first, the mind will be open enough to be able to discern, the enormity of all that's out there to pick and choose from, without losing yourself to thinking you have to let go of one belief to follow another. That's not what these times are about. That's why we see some disclosure narratives and some ascension narratives that are still cloaked in that savior, guru, follow me. I just see a lot more independence and transformation going on. And all the astrological alignments are really pointing towards, recognizing that we're the powers that be, they're the powers that stole, and we're calling that energy back. And on a collective level, we're the script writers of the future. So I think it's a perfect, zodiac totem animal for independence. And Uranus and Gemini is the independent thinker that will no longer just go along with whatever you're told. And children, I think there's going to be a lot more advanced souls coming in that will have more support of, parents and community to, yank them out of these indoctrination camps, yank them out of, and again, the more it's starved, the less, it can transfer these social engineering agendas onto us. And I just see a rerouting of all these very intelligent people that have not been able to see the larger picture, take those talents and skills and abilities to, begin to integrate a much more holistic approach on every level. So I see multiple drains being swamped. What's truly beneficial for the human race to rehabilitate, becoming more accessible, positive technologies that work in harmony with our awakening DNA and our soul development coming online, and free energy. So I see only good things ahead. They did not succeed at all. And I think, they're a little bit shocked at the power of the human spirit. Now they're going to watch and learn. And a lot of individuals, I think, are going to recover from being victimized by the families they were born into. And we're going to help them come home, because they've been entangled in this multi-generational mind control and SRA for generations. And so many are suffering. They don't want it. They don't know any other way out. And they're afraid to expose their captors because of, the video footage that's been taken of them. And I just feel like transparency rules, and we're going to just become more spiritually mature and more able to, handle these kind of stories, because if they're brave enough to share it, we have to be brave enough to listen.
So I want to finish up by giving you the floor to kind of talk about, what happened at this webinar that you were a part of, but basically it looked like there were forces conspiring to prevent you from being there. So, anything that you would like to say about, what happened at that webinar that for people that attended and wanted to hear you but couldn't?
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I was on for a little bit, and I tried to get back on, and your assistant was trying to help me get back on, and it just didn't seem to work. It showed that I was already logged in, but yet I wasn't on, and I tried a different device, and then I just realized what a distraction I was being, and I didn't want it to prevent the flow of everything that you guys were doing, to just be in the flow without having to check in. Where's Laura? And I just figured, we would come back around, or we would have a chance to, have this conversation. There were weather issues. We had high winds. The internet was a little bit unstable that day. So, maybe it was some kind of interference, but Yeah, I was super bummed because I was really looking forward to it. So I apologize for that. I mean, I'm so, it's so important for me to be on time and to, and I just really appreciated the opportunity. So so thank you for having me today. I really appreciate you pulling it back around and letting me, share, because everything we've been sharing is really about this topic, Earth's liberation from deep state. And I feel it's the micro macro. I mean, we're liberating ourselves from the deep state. The war on consciousness is being won from within. Anything that we find ourselves being yanked into that throws us into negative ego or survival or fight or flight or panic or fear, we got to face head on, and we have to override it, and be able to, see through it. And it's a reclamation. It's a remembrance. It's fully, standing in your truth. And that's what sovereignty is all about. And when we all achieve that, we can harmonize our differences and not, be in this duality, because duality and the divide and conquer is very much an inserted program. And a lot of times when you have to defend something, and you can't accept another perspective, you have to ask yourself, is that really truth? Because truth stands on its own, and, it heals us. It helps us to, walk in confidence with, what we know helps us to thrive. And it doesn't matter if other people think the same way. I don't care if other people agree with what I share. I'd prefer to have, tough questions being thrown at me, and I'd prefer to be quiet and sit still and listen than try and push something, because I feel we all have a unique purpose, and it's meant to, come together. So Earth's liberation from deep state, I feel, is looking at what's been targeted: sacred union relationships, our health, our ability to think for ourselves. Our children are targeted, and it starts at a very young age. Medical freedom, I mean, we're all overcoming this. And in doing that, we liberate the planet from the deep state, and it has to start with us. The deep state is only alive as long as we're in a dependency bond with it, as long as we, can't see through some of the facades, or we mistake false flags and psyops for being real events. And it doesn't mean that we assume everything's a conspiracy or everything's a false flag, but it's being so in touch with yourself that you can navigate, and navigate with coherence and clarity, and recognize that the planetary system is healing itself, that we are in a place right now, on Earth's path, where the geophysics of the planet is such that the stargates are opening, the galactic cores of Andromeda and Milky Way are one again. The 13th sign is in our calendar year, November 30th to December 17th, where we move through this ether element of transmutation and alchemy that was put in reversal before, so there's enough indications to prove that we are in a time of, great purification. And what we're waking up to is, ourselves. And the importance of love. And this is what healed my father. It wasn't the doctor. It wasn't the medicine. It was the fact that we didn't believe in what the fears from the doctor were saying, or what the fears of getting this were saying. We just held a space of, trust that he would know how to heal himself if he could remove himself from those belief systems. We have to give ourselves rooms to breathe, to be able to hear our own inner voice, because our higher guidance knows exactly what we need, and we can overcome way more than we could possibly imagine. And we're going to continue to drop the jaws of doctors and people that didn't even know it was possible. We're here to prove so much wrong by, living in accordance to what our divine guidance is telling us. And I've done that, and I think so many others that, we become the anomaly. I mean, the anomaly would be more miracles and less predictions and programming's, winning. It's like, what about what's coming through us? Divine inspiration. We don't want to silence that. We don't want to silence our children. We want to, really listen, because we're elemental beings. You wouldn't want the clouds to not rain or shut it up from, doing what it needs to come into equilibrium and balance. And, it's time to really listen to, what's coming through and understand the root of it instead of silencing it and trying to conform it and condition it and socially engineer it into something it's not. We've been played for too long. And so all the answers exist within us. So the more we give voice to it, the less we're just treating the pain and treating the symptoms. We're actually getting to the bottom of what it's here to tell us. And we will guide the future when we can listen. And then when we, support that in one another, we're bonded in that kind of like love and mutual respect. And we just realize, you don't want anybody to give that up for anyone, including what you believe to be truth. Just live your truth and allow others the same, and it'll all fall into place.
Thank you. So you want to tell people about your website and what you got coming up and how they can contact you?
Yeah, so my website's cosmicguide.org, and I do astrology charts to just really help you to know yourself, understand, the different patternings that might keep you in a loop. How the DNA is connected to the zodiac, connected to the planetary grid, and how we can de-weaponize the reversal grid by understanding what's actually, going on in our chart, so that we can get to the higher intelligence that knows exactly how to dismantle the dark weaponry. I mean, it has nothing on us. There's nothing to fear, going into the dark night of the soul, going into these greater initiations, is something that, has been hijacked and handed over to somebody else to solve, So I just hold space for people to work things out, to come to a Zoom call, to share about how your week has been and work out relationship issues and concerns about health, to find like-minded people and to just realize you're not alone. And it doesn't have to be doom or gloom or, these are all initiations. In the face of these adversities, you're going to get to know yourself better. In the face of disease, you're going to uncover the hidden gifts and abilities and the innate wisdom that, is taking you closer to home. These are not death sentences. There's just a lot to celebrate. And it's just about passing the talking stick, like everybody's got something, profound to share. And I share about the events that I'm doing. I'm doing an event in Sedona, November 8th. I'm doing a bunch of, different conferences, and just using the tool of astrology to, reclaim the inner elementals and break the programmings and move into that 0-point unified field and, be a part of the planetary system correcting itself as a conduit for, the expansion of human consciousness and the resolution of fragmentation within the self and amongst each other. So let's aim high and just know that victory has already been had, because when you win the war within, you are the embodiment of victory, and you end up leading by example. And so I like to celebrate that within each individual that I work with, because there's not one soul that does not have it in them to, reclaim the goodness of just all we were meant to be.
Well, thank you, Lyra, for giving us such an inspiring and uplifting interview. You shared a lot of information, and I'm sure people are going to feel pretty good walking away from this. So thank you.
I hope so, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. And it's always a pleasure. It's just always an honor. I appreciate your work, and you're inexhaustible, and you've provided so much for the human race to work with to achieve these incredible goals of victory over the deep state and liberation. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.